This is Design30. Welcome in, everybody. I hope you had a great Labor Day and are ready for another Design30 episode. Today we will be discussing prototypes versus pretotypes. And I know what you're thinking, what in the world is a pretotype? And why does the name sound so stupid? It's essentially a pre-prototype. So I have a definition for each of these. For a prototype, I define it as a early functional model or version of your final product for testing requirements and garnering user feedback. And I define a pretotype or a pre-prototype as an early representation of product concepts or features designed to test specific use cases and ideas, commonly non-functional. So there are two distinct definitions for these. However, there's definitely a lot of crossover between the two, and it really depends on what field you're working in and your personal preference, or whether or not you just want to call something a pretotype, because it is kind of a dumb name, but it's also kind of fun. So let's look at a few examples just to better define the difference between a pretotype and a prototype. So for example, let's say you are designing a table. A pretotype for a table could look as simple as a styrofoam, a big chunk of styrofoam on top of a few cardboard boxes. And then a prototype for a table would be something a little bit more elaborate and usable, such as a table being made out of 2x4s or some sort of inexpensive wood or just scrap wood you have laying around. For another example would be a cup. So a pretotype of a cup could be made of something like Play-Doh that you could steal from your children. Or a prototype would look like something that's handmade with clay, and you could fire it in a kiln or in an oven to make a somewhat legitimate cup that you could do user testing with and actually drink stuff out of. How about something non-physical, such as an app? Well, a pretotype for an app could look as simple as a PowerPoint slide deck, where you're just getting the overall look and feel and kind of workflow for your application. And then a prototype for an app would probably be some sort of lightweight functional version of the app that's actually developed. And then another example would be a toothbrush. So a pretotype of a toothbrush could be made of cardboard or clay or Play-Doh once again, and it could be as simple as using toothpicks to model the bristles. Obviously, this wouldn't be functional, but if you're testing the overall shape, perhaps the ergonomics of the handle, this is a way to do it. And then a prototype would be something more legitimate. You could 3D print the handle and attach the head of an existing brush. Just cut it off and glue it on, or somehow attach it to your 3D printed handle. And then that would actually be functional with operational bristles and something you could get more legitimate testing out of. I first learned about pretotypes during my graduate program, and we did a project where we were looking at designing a coffee product of some sort. So we came up with different pretotypes for coffee makers and some coffee grinders. And these were literally as simple as being built out of scrap pieces of cardboard. For one of our coffee makers, we actually attached two plastic bottles together. For some of the coffee grinder concepts, we used some old plastic spools that were typically had wire wrapped around them. And we took these and put them in front of actual people. So we went out on the street on Pearl Street, if you've ever been to Boulder, Colorado, and literally just had it set up and started asking random people as they walked by if they wanted to look at our products and provide us with a little bit of user feedback on these really simple prototypes. And this actually worked pretty well. We gained a lot of insight into what people wanted as far as new coffee products. We understood what shapes they liked, which ones they thought were kind of awkward, what sizes they preferred, different shapes, what they perceived would be difficult with these different designs. And overall was a pretty fun process and actually gave us real insights into the type of coffee product we should pursue. So what are the different use cases for a pretotype versus a prototype? How do you know when you want to create one versus the other? So I would say you want to pretotype as soon as possible. It's a way to capture rapid customer feedback when you're looking at specific aspects of a design or even wanting to test out different concepts. You also want to look at prototypes when you have a small budget. These are typically inexpensive, cheap, made of scrap from around your office or your workspace. And there's something that should be fairly cheap, if not free, to design and manufacture. If you're not sure what the market wants, prototyping is another good option for that. For example, when we were testing out these different coffee products, we didn't know what the market wanted. There's so many coffee products out in the world. It's really hard to just have a unique idea right away. So you need something to help stimulate conversation, stimulate ideas within your customer base. And that's what prototypes are really good for. Or you can use a prototype when you can't decide between two features on your product. You can do some A/B testing and use prototypes to pull that off. Or if you're stuck and kind of bored on a design project, start building some prototypes, and these will help stimulate ideas. That's fun. You can put it in the hands of other people on your team and brainstorm. So it's also a really good way to stimulate new ideas. I also highly recommend bringing prototypes with you to meetings. Once again, it's a great way for people to physically see your ideas, and it's a great way to start conversations. It allows people to maybe express different concerns that they have with the product or potential difficulties. So overall, it can be a really nice way to have a productive meeting. When do you want to prototype then? Well, a prototype is, like I said, typically more functional. When you're wanting to test actual requirements for your product, you will probably want a prototype, since prototypes are so conceptual and made out of random materials. You're not actually going to be able to test the real requirements for your product. You will want to use a prototype after validating that you have a good product market fit. Because prototypes are more expensive, you're typically not going to want to sink a bunch of money into a prototype until you're fairly confident that there's a good fit between your product and the market that you're trying to fit it into. And along those lines, you need to do it, or you want to do a prototype when you're ready to spend a significant amount of money. Or if you're looking for user feedback on a fully or perhaps partially functional product. This is when a prototype is going to be the way to go as opposed to a prototype. So what are the key aspects of a prototype? And some of this may seem a bit repetitive, but by the end of this episode, I hope you're able to very easily describe the difference between a prototype and a prototype. So the key aspects of a prototype are they're cheap, they're inexpensive components. They're made of random cardboard, paper clips, random stuff around your office, things in your workshop, scrap metal, scrap wood, anything like that. They should be fast. You should be able to construct multiple prototypes within 48 hours. So within a day, you should be able to have a whole lineup of prototypes. They're used for testing concepts, maybe specific features, or even risky ideas that you're not sure are worth spending the money on a real life prototype, but you want to at least test the waters a little bit. They should also be simple. They're not representative of the final product, but they're representative of a concept or a specific feature. And finally, a prototype should be used in the planning or architecture phase of your product development process. Potentially in the business case phase, but most likely beyond that. Now, a prototype is something that is typically more expensive. They're time consuming to build, so a lot more man hours go into building them or to manufacture them. They typically have components that are made out of house, whether that's machined parts, sheet metal parts, or perhaps even a contractor on the side. They provide you high confidence testing and allow you to do legitimate data collection. So this is why you can actually test your requirements with a prototype. They're often fully functional, at least fully functional in most respects. Obviously, there might be additional functionality added or removed once you release your product. But compared to a prototype, I would consider them fully functional. And then typically, you're going to start building prototypes in the alpha phase of your product development cycle. Maybe as early as architecture, but I would say the alpha phase. And just to dive in a little bit to this product development cycle that I'm referring to, I know there's a lot of different ways to do this, and a lot of people have different ideas. But the product development cycle that I'm most familiar with starts with a business case. This says, or asks the question, is there a market for this product, and should we go after it? Once you pass the business case, you move into the architecture phase. And this is where you do most of your planning for the project. You develop all of your requirements, and you have a good idea of what you want to build to reach this product market fit. And in the alpha phase, you actually build up a prototype and you start testing to ensure that you can meet all of the requirements that you established during the architecture phase. Then you move from there into your beta phase. This is where you polish up your design, make it something that looks good and is something that can actually be built by your production team. And then after that is your pilot phase. And this is where you actually put your beta or your product through your production process. Make sure they can source parts, that they can build and test the product, and then finally ship it to a customer. And once you pass that, then you're ready for your production release. So I think I've covered quite a bit here. So let's go back and just do a quick review. So what is a prototype? A prototype is an early functional model or version of your final product for testing requirements and garnering user feedback. A pretotype is an early representation of product concepts or features designed to test specific use cases and ideas. Commonly non-functional. However, it can be functional, but make sure it's simple. In a high-level overview of prototypes, once again, they're more expensive, they take more effort and time to build, but they can be used to test your actual product requirements because they have significant functionality. And a prototype is inexpensive. It can literally be made of scrap. You use it to test specific concepts or features very early on in the development process. They're simple and quick to build. Now, I think we're ready for the Design30 discipline for the week. So first off, start by creating a list of things that you're currently working on or designing. This could be something you're working on at work or just things that you're working on at home, potentially just products you think would be fun to make. So come up with at least 5 of these. And then secondly, write out how you would build or design a prototype for each product. And then thirdly, write out how you would prototype each one. And these could be sketches, whatever you want to do just to kind of show how you would build this prototype and these prototypes. And then number 4, pick 1 or 2 of your prototype ideas and actually build them. And whether this is building them out of cardboard, 3D printing them, prototyping it in PowerPoint, as we've discussed, anything like that. And then for number 5, bring them to a meeting, discuss them with a coworker, or just show them to a friend, but somehow get feedback from someone other than yourself, and maybe try describing to them what the difference is between a pretotype and a prototype. And that is all I have on prototypes versus pretotypes. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope pretotypes is a concept that you can take into whatever you do and get legitimate feedback, help you decide between concepts or different features for your designs. And if you don't like it, if you think the word is too silly, you don't have to use it. It's up to you. So thank you so much for listening. As always, please give the podcast a 5-star review, and feel free to subscribe to the Design30 Substack. You can do that for free. And you can also find Design30 on YouTube and on Instagram. And I believe that's it. This has been another episode of Design30. As always, thank you so much for listening.